Welcome to the Wing Chun Discussion Podcast with your hosts, Dane and Vito, interviewing Wing Chun practitioners and instructors, expanding the world of Wing Chun. Tell us a little bit about you before we get into anything Wing Chun. Where are you from?
I'm originally from the Bronx, New York, by way of Hartford, Connecticut. I was born in Hartford, raised in New York, moved down here to Lakeland about 18 years ago.
Mm-hmm. So that's a big transition, right? Like the culture of New York to the culture of Lakeland.
Oh, yeah. 20 years later, and I still can't get to sleep easy at night. I miss the noise.
That's funny. So do you have like a little app that has like cab noises and street sweepers or something like that?
No, nowadays I just kind of leave the TV on and let it go and set a timer for it to shut off a couple hours later.
Yeah. For those of our listeners that don't know, Lakeland is it would be considered like maybe a smaller city.
It is a small city compared to Tampa, Orlando, and stuff, but it's been growing. I mean, Kathleen, which was our neighbor, was absorbed by Lakeland. I want to say about a decade ago, and so it's been growing little by little. I mean, I live in a new cul-de-sac that was built. I don't know, about, I want to say 2 years ago, 3 years ago. So I mean, and they're continuously building all kinds of stuff over here, from homes to new businesses and stuff like that, which unfortunately, due to everything that's going on, all that's been kind of halted for a little bit. But I mean, it's still growing.
Cool. And okay, so you moved down to Florida about 18 years ago. Tell us a little bit about your history with martial arts. How'd you get into martial arts?
Well, my father was in the military before I was born, and for a little bit of time after I was born, he was in the Army. And when I turned about 5 years old, he tried to start training me. He was a black belt in multiple systems, Tang Soo Do being his first, as well as Japanese Jiu-Jitsu and Judo and Taekwondo, the variation called Hanmu Kwan. So it was just like on its way to me sooner or later, thanks to him. He trained my mom. My mom had 3 black belts. I've got uncles that are kickboxers and boxers. One of my cousins, Angel Manfredy, he was a former boxing lightweight champion of the world.
Wow.
Yeah, his moniker was Angel the Devil Manfredy, which is crazy because he's one of the most, God-fearing men I've ever met.
Good.
So, but yeah, he's fought people like Floyd Mayweather and stuff like that. If you guys remember a boxer by the name of Arturo Gatti back in '98, he took his title from him. So it's kind of a thing in my family to kind of build fighters. But my father realized at an early on that he wasn't going to be able to be my teacher because I was resistant even at 5. And it was thanks to my grandmother, actually, who told him to find another way if he really wanted me to learn. So he actually looked for another martial arts instructor, and he knew of one who taught Kung Fu. So that's how I got started in Kung Fu. It wasn't Wing Chun. It was actually multiple systems under the Long Fist family. So including variation of drunken boxing and 7-star mantis, so on and so forth.
Wow. So your whole family is involved in some sort of martial arts or some sort of combat sport like that.
Pretty much.
And yet you resisted. You didn't want to do that at first until you had another teacher.
Yeah, I didn't want to do it with him. My father was a tough man. I mean, his stature would fool you. He was about 5'9", 5'10" at most, and that's barely getting there. And about 160 pounds, soaking wet all my life, And his stature would fool you, but he was a tough one, man. I mean, at 15 years old, I saw him get into an argument with a guy in the middle of the street, and then that guy and his boys tried to jump him. And it was about 4 of them, before I could even run across the street, he was done. So,
Wow.
and and it wasn't even they didn't even have a chance to swing on him. They just like they kind of puffed their chest out. He felt like he was in danger, and they surrounded him. He reacted as fast as he could and hit them all and got the heck out of there. And then he didn't run. He kind of like got out of the center and then stood, with his head held high, looking at him, talking about, nah, with that look in his eye, like, I wouldn't do that if I were you, type deal.
Wow, that sounds like a scene out of a movie or something.
Yeah, that's how it felt for me, man. I was 15 years old, so I was starstruck by my old man. So,
Wow, that's really crazy.
but I mean, fortunately, I had that push all my life where my father, like I said, he was a hard man. So when he was trying to teach me, he was teaching me old school, traditional, what they call hard style methodology. Kind of like,
Hmm.
punch this wall with your fist type deal.
Hmm.
And I was 5 years old, so I didn't want to go through that. I guess I can't remember to save my life. I mean, I was five, but I guess I didn't
Yeah.
want to go through that, and having my own dad do it to me. You know, so my grandmother, basically, who was my guardian angel all my life, she just told him, he was like, if you really want him to do it, you need to find another way.
Uh-huh.
And kung fu ended up entering my life, and that was it.
I wonder what were the differences that you saw with Kung Fu, when you started versus the other hard stuff that you were exposed to?
My sifu, his name was Wang Shi. He made it fun for me. Like, that's one thing I remember my entire life with him. I was from 5 years old till I was 17, which was the year he passed. Uh, he made every moment fun. Like, even at a young age, I can remember him kind of clowning around with me and all the other students in class and so on and so forth, which wasn't a very big class because he taught a very small, intimate, private group, which mostly consisted of his children and grandchildren and so on and so forth. Um, but yeah, man, he made it fun. He figured out real early I had a lot of energy, so he introduced me, funny enough, to drunken boxing. And
Uh-huh.
at 7 years old, and that ended up becoming like my favorite out of all the forms he taught me. And it was just he tried to find a way. That was basically the difference. He tried to find a way to make me love it versus forcing me to do it. And
Oh,
that's
I
that's
see.
that's what with my dad, that's what I was feeling, even though that looking back on it now, it wasn't what he was doing. He was just
Hmm.
teaching the way he was taught. But
Hmm.
for a little kid, you don't want to do anything like that. You want to sit, watch cartoons. This is 1985, mind you. I'm sitting there watching Thundercats and GI Joe and He-Man and stuff like that. And that's all I want to do after school. I don't want to do anything else.
Yeah. Yeah, when you're a kid, you just want to do silly stuff or
Yeah,
or whatever.
you do silly stuff in kindergarten all day, and you come out and you got to sit here and you're in the backyard, freaking punching a rice bag all day. It's like,
Holding up buckets of water and
yeah.
balancing on a foot or
Oh,
yeah.
I still did stuff like that. Don't get me wrong, but it was just, I guess it was because it was my dad. That's what kind of made it worse, you know?
Yeah, I think that makes sense because getting having an authority figure that's close to you is different than having an authority figure that's kind of external.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, I even see it now with my own students, you know?
Hmm.
Each and every one of my students, it's kind of a running joke at my kun, that, all they have to say is, I'm going to tell Sifu, and they snap right into, into place.
Hmm.
So even their teachers at school, because unlike a lot of other Mick Dojo martial arts schools, I actually go to the schools, and if the kid's having trouble in school with behavior, I go to the school and uh, sit in their classroom for a little while. I have a volunteer identification with the Polk County school system, so I can go to the
Wow.
schools and walk in, and I'll just stand there while they're doing their work, and I'll just that puts their fear of God into them. So all the teachers know me. I mean, I have a couple teachers who have their kids with me. One of the teachers at the high school where my daughter graduated from, he's actually my student. So it's that was another way to get into that high school, which is Lake Gibson High School here in Lakeland. But yeah, I go. We tend to take it seriously. When my Sifu was in my life, that's what he did. If I got in trouble in school, my father was out of state or out of country because of the military.
Hmm.
Um, he would be there. He'd show up in my school and just give me that really uneasy look, like, oh, I screwed up. So I kind of pay it forward.
That is super interesting. You had your Sifu taking this holistic approach, like making sure that you're good in the class and you're good outside the class, and then you continue to do that in Lakeland with your
Yeah.
kids.
Oh yeah, I do. I mean, don't get me wrong. Uh, I wasn't always an angel. I had my hiccups in life, especially the year he passed. I had a lot of hiccups when he passed. I got very angry and stuff like that. I'm Puerto Rican, so I'm hot blooded and hot headed at times. So um,
Hmm.
it was like losing my grandfather. I grew up, with just one grandparent in my life. My mother was a foster kid, so she had her foster parents, but they weren't really in my life.
Hmm.
Um, and I never knew my father's father, so I only had my father's mother, which was my grandmother, um, in my life my entire life. So when this man came into my life, he became my surrogate grandfather. So um,
Wow.
I mean, there was a stint in time where I was having a hard time at home from 13 to 14, where I ended up going to live with him for about a year. So
Wow.
and
Okay.
yeah, and that was my grandmother's recommendation, because she was telling my parents, who like, he's the only one he listens to, so send him to him.
That's crazy. That is, I mean, it's that's different. You don't hear that every day.
No, I mean, again, I'm from New York. I'm from the Bronx. Where when you grow up in the projects in the Bronx or anywhere in New York, actually, it takes the village. You got everybody in the buildings that has permission to whoop you behind if you mess up. You know, so if you mess up in school and everybody hears about it, you kind of getting your butt kicked by every old Hispanic woman from school home. So
Wow.
That is funny.
yeah, that's something that doesn't go on nowadays. I mean, unfortunately. Fortunately and unfortunately, I won't give it a solid negative, but I mean, there's some cases where discipline is required and a very soft-handed approach is taken. And when I mean discipline, I don't mean put a paddle across somebody's behind. I mean, discipline can come in many forms. My Sifu never put a paddle on my behind to discipline me. Every time he gave me a look, I knew I was in trouble, and I just had to go do whatever workouts I had to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
The only time I was ever hit with anything from him was, during training. He would hit me with bamboo rods to make sure my arms were in the right place, and my legs were in the right place, checking my posture and checking the strength of my back, and so on and so forth. Other than that, discipline wise, it wasn't like that. It was always learning experience where a look in his eye of disappointment hurt way more than any rod would ever do.
Hmm.
So discipline's a really important part of your school and the things that you pass to your students.
Oh yeah, discipline is a very big part of my school. I teach on eight principles, which I call my core principles, and that's brotherhood, dedication, respect, cooperation, discipline, attitude, confidence, and self-respect. And this is something they have to study from the first day till their last day. They have to repeat it every single day in class. And then we have our core values, which is honesty, loyalty, communication, and productivity. So
Hmm.
it's one of those things where if they don't follow any of that, they got to pay for it with a physical interaction. Like you have to do burpees, or push-ups, or you have to sit in a horse stance holding on to the staff. Or in my case with my kids, it's you have to sit in a horse stance with a very thin bowl of water on top of the back of your hand. On both hands, you drop that water. For every little drop, it's 100 push-ups. If you drop the whole thing, you're going to sit there all day. And that's
So Jimmy, it makes me wonder. I mean, this discipline with the kids is really great, and I love to see this in kung fu. Does this translate to your adult students too somehow?
oh yeah, no, it translates the exact same way. No, I don't change my teaching method for my adults. I'm actually a lot harder on them when it comes down to discipline. I have a rule in my place, and I tell it to my adults every time they come to my school. There's one rule. If you get hit, it's your own damn fault. So that means, if you're not disciplined enough to listen to the lesson at hand, then the consequence is going to be you messing it up, and your partner's going to pop you. And if I got to teach you how to be an adult, somebody else already screwed up in your life. So if I've got to fix that, I'm not going to be nice about it. This is okay. No, it's time for drill instructor Jimmy to come out. Now you're going to be doing, hardcore push-ups. We're going to go out behind a building on the concrete, and that's where you're going to do your push-ups. That's where you're going to do your calisthenics. We're going to do a full-out burnout until you can't even lift your arms and stand straight without your legs jiggling.
So how many of those does it take before they get the point?
One. It only takes one. It only takes one. And with an adult, it never goes past one. It either straightens them up and gets them ready to continue, or they don't ever come back. That's
the kind of people you want in your school. People that have some discipline and some self-respect and respect for the school and the art and everything that you're doing there.
Yeah, definitely. That's exactly what I look for. That tends to weed people out really, really quickly. Which is, unlike most places, I would love to have like 30, 40 students, adult students in my class, you know what I mean, at once. That would be great. But I look at it like this. If I had 30, 40 students that were, for lack of a better way to say it, embellishing their capabilities and reasons why they're there, then I'd be teaching by the numbers. I'd be like, okay, everybody, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and I'm not that kind of instructor. I like to be there and teach you hands on the way I was taught. Unless something takes me away from either the school for some reason, an event, or I've got to work on something, and then my instructors take over, my assistant instructors take over. But other than that, I don't like having to teach people who aren't really interested in being there, one, who don't take it seriously, two, and don't see a benefit in it either than, saying that they took martial arts in their life once before, which is something I hear like every other day with someone who walks through the door, like, oh, I took martial arts back in the day. And then when you ask them what style, it's always the same one, which don't get me wrong, I have a second degree black belt in Taekwondo, and I love Taekwondo. I mean, it's taught me some of the fanciest kicks I've ever learned in my life outside of wushu. But then you ask them, so how far did you get? And it's always, I got to about an orange belt. How old were you? Oh, I was about 7 or 8. How old are you now? 39. So it's a factor that I take very seriously. So I'm not heartbroken when people walk out the door. I mean, if it's not for them, it's not for them. I'm a very traditional mindset instructor with a modern touch, I guess I would like to call it, because I use modern training techniques, but I also use traditional training techniques, which for some people might be a little too hard, especially in this day and age where you got, have it your way martial arts schools, and then, with MMA being such a big thing nowadays, people only think that martial arts is what MMA encompasses. As far as what you see on TV, they don't even realize that those MMA fighters, although they don't all train traditional martial arts, They all still train martial arts, whether it's a little bit of each one or a lot of bit of each one, but they dedicate themselves to training those techniques. So it's honestly no different in my eyes than an old school traditional martial art, because you got to train. I mean, you could tell me you fight MMA all you want, but if you don't train every day, you're not going to beat anybody. It's
Hmm.
the same in kickboxing. I mean, I'm a Sanda fighter, which is Chinese kickboxing. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but if you take Muay Thai and you take the elbows away and add throws, almost like judo throws, and then take you out of a ring and put you on a platform where you can Spartan kick somebody off the edge if you want. Um, that's the style. That's the style of kickboxing I came up in.
Yeah.
Um, so it's a mindset, man. You gotta have the right mindset, and if you don't have the right mindset, I'm okay with you walking out the door. I'm always that guy. Don't leave angry, just leave.
Hmm.
You know.
Yeah, it sounds like you really you want to foster a certain toughness as part of your approach
Oh yeah,
to teach.
yeah. You have to. I mean, at the end of the day, this is self-defense. Period. I mean, any martial art instructor who tell you otherwise, I don't know what they're paying attention to. At the end of the day, martial arts is for two reasons and two reasons only: to keep yourself healthy
Hmm.
and to defend your life. Period.
Hmm.
Martial arts, I mean, take the words out of the dictionary one by one. Martial, warlike study, art, creation of beautiful things.
Hmm.
And whether you put them together or not, it still means the same thing: a warlike study and creation of beautiful things. So, I mean, you can't have one without the other and still do this. It's like seeing knife defense techniques, and there's no actual resistance against the person holding the knife, and you show these fancy techniques. I mean, okay, fine, that's cool. Now let me actually come at you like I want to kill you, and let's see if that works.
Yeah.
Choke defense techniques. Oh yeah, let's do it like this. Okay, well, I'm from the Bronx, and I've had people run up on me and try to choke me.
Hmm.
Let me do that to you and see if it works. I pressure test everything. Do I teach every part of the system? Yes, each and every part of the system. But I am honest in my opinions when I say, in my personal opinion, this right here is better suited for this than what it was originally designed for. And this right here may not work ever. I'm honest in my approach. So when it comes down to it, I don't use the mystical side of things to teach people martial arts. I mean, there's a ton of it. You can have a million chi masters look at you all you want. I mean, unless you can physically drop me, that 1,000-yard stare is not scaring me.
Yeah. There has been like criticism on the internet when it comes to like chi masters um, getting involved with like MMA fighters, and getting pressure tested. Those videos have kind of surfaced and
Oh yeah,
become
it's
popular recently.
and I say the same thing. My wife and I will sit there and we'll laugh, and not laugh because they're getting their butt kicked, but laugh at their ignorance in getting in their period with a guy who trains for that.
Yeah.
It's the dumbest thing to walk into somebody's kitchen and think you know where the tools are. You know, that's like the easiest way I can put it.
That's
You're not gonna,
that's good.
yeah, you're not gonna walk into my kitchen and know where all my knives and utensils are. That's it. Unless they're out there plain as day for you to see, you're still not gonna know where the ingredients are. You're gonna you ask me 50 times, where's this, where's that? So if you're who was it? And I don't want to give this guy any more popularity than YouTube has already given him, but I mean he's the one who started it all. It was an MMA fighter out in China called Xu Xiaodong,
Hmm.
and he challenged this Tai Chi master. You know,
Hmm.
First of all, you're 30 something years old and you're challenging I don't know, 50, 60-year old Tai Chi master. I mean that's just stupid right there. On both parts. His for issuing the challenge on an older gentleman like that, period, and then the older guy for accepting the challenge.
Hmm.
Um, but you can't jump into. I don't care if you've been doing martial arts for 40, 50 years. you can't jump into an MMA fighter's ring when that's all he does is train for that, you know,
Yeah.
and not at least encompass part of their methodology, their mindset, or even put some training in to at least teach yourself how to defend against what they're going to do to you. That's just, in my opinion, that's asinine.
And I know that's one of the things that is kind of salient on the internet right now when it comes to Wing Chun, because there's a lot of videos where Wing Chun, like fighters, or Wing Chun practitioners get in the ring with other MMA fighters. Could you speak to that a little bit too?
Well, it's the same thing. I mean, a Wing Chun fighter. I mean, I could sit here and say the same thing every person who's gotten their butt kicked after the fact, and say, "Oh, this is for the streets," or "This is for the streets." Look, you can apply methodologies of any martial art in any combat sport. Period. You know,
Mm-hmm.
Anderson Silva, he utilized Wing Chun methodologies while he was in there. You could see, rolling hands and stuff like that. Was it exactly how you drill it? No, but it was there. You've got other martial arts, take Lyoto Mochida. Now, this isn't Wing Chun, don't get me wrong. So I'll drive right back to that. But Lyoto Mochida, he's a Kyokushinkai karate fighter. Watch him very closely. He fights in an MMA style, but he throws in his Kyokushinkai techniques every chance he gets.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same thing. If you study a specific martial art, and when I say study, I mean truly, wholeheartedly train it, pressure test it. You're not going to sit here and tell me you've studied something for 20, 30 years and never been in a fight. I'm not going to train with you. Because how in God's name can you prove to me that the technique works if you've never actually utilized it?
Mm-hmm.
And that goes for training method as well. If your training method doesn't work, then I don't know what you're teaching me. I mean, all you're teaching me here is to waste time. I need something that works. So I've seen them all. I've touched hands with a bunch of people in the Wing Chun community, and I'll tell you who can jump in a ring and survive and who can't. I've jumped in the ring. I've jumped in the MMA ring a few times. MMA was not for me. I mean, I've won and I've lost. I'm more of a kickboxer when it comes down to combat sport.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say that openly. I got plenty of friends. I have a good friend here in town who runs one of the most successful MMA schools here in town. His one of his prize students, she just went and won her first professional match in Bellator. And I've got people that come from his school to train with me to get their hands right, and get their close quarter on their feet right. So if you train it properly, anything will work. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Anything will work.
Yeah. It sounds like what you're saying. Like it's that any of the concepts. Like if we're talking about Wing Chun, like you can take those concepts and apply them. They don't have to be, the perfect structure of it that you see like in a video, but it has to be applied through practicality for what you're doing.
Oh yeah. And going back to the whole, people say, after they get their butt kicked, oh well, it didn't work because this is for the street. No, don't give me that. First of all, Wing Chun Kung Fu is based on a continuous principle, that attacks a center line principle. I will attack your center line continuously. I mean, the most famous technique Wing Chun has is what? What do people crack on the most? The chain punching.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody goes, oh, well, that's not ever going to work. Well, for me, chain punching is a bridging tool. I'll chain punch, and as soon as I touch you, I switch to something else. I'll grab you, I'll pull you, I'll put my freaking thumb in your eye. Something's going to work. But the whole
Mm-hmm.
point is to keep coming until I can get there. So when it comes down to it, if you can't make it work, that has nothing to do with the art. That has to do with you.
Yeah.
You're not pushing it. You're not pressure testing it. You're not making it work. I mean, I tell people all the time, I tell my own students all the time, if you have an opportunity to cross train with someone, go to a Brazilian jiu-jitsu school, train with somebody who does groundwork, and that's all they do. Train
Hmm.
with a kickboxer, no matter the discipline, Muay Thai, Sanda, American kickboxing, um, boxers, because that's all they do is work with their hands like that. Train with it, because if you can't find a way to defend against it, you're just spinning your wheels.
I'd like you to touch a little bit more on how you're using um, your chain punches as a bridging tool, because I wonder if some practitioners feel like the chain punching is like a finishing move, or like
Oh yeah, they do.
something like that.
They do. I've come across a lot of people in my time where they feel that, they'll do one or two techniques, nice little flashy, maybe tan sao, bong sao techniques or anything. And then all of a sudden they just keep throwing punches. And that's the way they teach, by the way. They'll sit there and teach it to you. Oh, tanda, and then lin wan kun, tanda, tan punch, chain punch. And that's their finishing tool. I
Hmm.
mean, I don't know about them or anyone else, but even in boxing or stuff like that, you got combinations that only one, two, maximum three techniques will hit before they get shot backwards or to the left or to the right.
Hmm.
You're working with a dynamic target, not a static target. It's not the wooden dummy. You can't sit there and hit a person 50 times without them recoiling. It
Hmm.
doesn't work that way. Unless you knock them out with the first punch, you're not going to keep continuously punching them. It's not going to
Yeah.
work.
So what you're saying is like you might after you do your combination, then you might maybe follow them with your chain punch to bridge, or maybe to make them react so that you can
Yeah,
counter.
exactly. I use it as a bridging tool. If nine, 9 times out of 10, first, I try to keep in my head, if I'm going to defend myself, I have to pay attention to the situation. And the situation has to be, they're getting aggressive, their posture, if they start posturing up like they're about to swing at me, so on and so forth. At that point, I have to get into a defensive mindset without letting them know I get into a defensive mindset. That's why, for me to tell any one of my students, if you feel like you're about to get into a fight, jump into your Wing Chun guard, put your Mun San Wu Sao up.
Hmm.
You just told this person you want to fight.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
put your hands around center of your chest, get fidgety in their eyes, mess with your fingers, mess with your watch, don't crack your knuckles, because that tells them, okay, he's getting ready to punch me. you know
Yeah.
just sit there. Why? Because now you got 50% of the distance to your growing, 50% of the distance to your face. And then once that connection's broken, chain punch until you connect again. That can be one punch, that could be 5 punches, that could be 2 punches. It doesn't matter. Once you make contact with their body again, you have to switch to something else. You know, I don't want to punch somebody's skull with my knuckles. I'm 40 years old. Okay, I don't want to punch somebody anymore. I palm people more than I punch them nowadays.
Uh-huh.
Um, but even when I was younger, hitting somebody right on the skull, that hurt. And i don't
Hmm.
i don't want to hit somebody 20, 30 times in the head like that, because a, only one or two are going to connect, and then I'm just going to look like an idiot swinging at air. And b,
Hmm.
it's might end up hurting me, whether
Yeah.
it just makes creaky knuckles or I break a finger or something just because I hit the wrong part of the head. So it's just,
Hmm.
I get in there, I connect, and then I use any other technique, the snaking techniques, the um you know opening techniques from the crane portion of the snake and crane, you know what I mean? So like fox sao and stuff like that, those are, if you want to break it down, the crane side of Wing Chun. And if you use BUG and all that stuff, that's a snake style of Wing Chun, So it's I use all that stuff to snake into the body and control them. Kung Fu in a whole has another system hidden within it, and nobody ever touches on that. Like every single Kung Fu system I've ever done, anyway. There's another hidden system within inside them, and it's called Chin Na, which is joint manipulation.
Mm-hmm.
Every Kung Fu system I've ever come across has a form of joint manipulation, which falls under Chin Na. Once I get into that, I'm grabbing a thumb, I'm grabbing a finger, a pinky, something like that. Dude, I'll put my finger in your mouth and fish hook you and take you to the ground. I don't care. It's realistic combat that we're doing here. So when it comes down to it, you got to train that way.
Wow. Yeah. Like there's no fair fight, right?
No. So when you take
anything
an MMA fighter and put him in the street, you think he's going to stop his choke when you tap?
Yeah. No.
He's not. He's going to put you out. Period. And God forbid he does, because one of two things are going to happen. He's going to keep choking and possibly kill you, or he's going to knock you out, know that you're knocked out, then he's going to get up and stomp the crap out of you.
Mm-hmm.
So either way, it's a lose-lose.
Yeah.
That's like the MMA fighter Anthony Smith. Someone broke into his house and he had to fight him off, and it was just some untrained mugger broke into his house, and he said it was the fight of his life.
Because
I mean, he's on ESPN saying that it was the fight of his life, harder fight than anyone he's ever fought in the ring, and this person wasn't even a trained fighter.
Yeah.
But they were desperate.
Oh, it doesn't have to be, dude. If I had a nickel for every trained fighter I've seen knocked out in the street, it's not even. Come on, BJ Penn, Hall of Fame UFC fighter, knocked out in a street fight. Period. I mean, there's no other way to say it. Shout out to BJ. He's a fantastic, fighter. But the truth of the matter is, when you're fighting for your life, that's chaos, man. I mean, when you're fighting for a combat sport, that's literally a controlled chaos. You got rules. You got somebody in the middle, saving your behind when things aren't going right. If you're losing, somebody's going to jump in and say, okay, that's enough. On the street, people are going to pull their phones out and put it up on YouTube. That's just how it's going to be nowadays. Back in the day, we didn't have YouTube, so you'd be lucky to get a record of whooping somebody's behind or getting your behind whooped. We didn't have cell phones with cameras. So. I sound like an old man, but I mean, I came up when cell phones were went from a freaking a cell phone in a satchel that had a gigantic receiver and a battery. My dad had that thing, and to that gray brick, to the flip phone, to the Star Tech, to now what we have. So it's a crazy change in the world when it comes down to it.
The cell phones have really changed the game, and the internet too.
Oh yeah,
it seems.
Yeah, the internet's changed the game. I regret not jumping onto YouTube when it first came out to do tips and tricks back then. Man, there's no telling where my channel would be now. I literally just launched my channel like this year. Or not, you know what? Not even that. I launched my channel a few weeks ago.
What is your channel? What's the name of it? So if anyone wants to look it up,
it's Sifu Manfredy, and the banner says Street Kung Fu.
Cool. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing on your channel.
I'm doing some drills. So far I've been doing drills. I'm going to be doing some martial art equipment product reviews. I'm going to start getting some stuff and basically answering questions. People like, is this any good? I'm also going to bring people in, cross train and show what other martial arts that have, been forgotten per se, not forgotten, but kind of lost in the shadows nowadays, how effective they may be.
What do you mean about that?
Exactly. Well, there's a ton of martial arts systems that are still out there that, people nowadays, again, not to the fault of MMA, but MMA was kind of a catalyst. Um, have been just kind of like ignored. People are like, "Oh, this isn't gonna work, so I'm gonna go over here and learn MMA," which is fine. Um, so little by little, these schools have either been disappearing or just taking more exclusive clientele and just sticking to that. You know what I mean? I mean, Wing Chun, I mean, trust me when I tell you, if it wasn't for the popularity of Donnie Yen pulling out the Wing Chun Ip Man movies, people wouldn't even know that Wing Chun was still out there.
Mm-hmm.
In Hong Kong cinema, if you ever watch an old school kung fu flick, you don't even realize you're watching only two systems. I don't care what they tell you the system is. They could tell you it's Tiger Claw. They could tell you it's Eagle. They could tell you all this stuff. They'll incorporate a few moves from that specific system, but everything else, it's Hung Gar and Wing Chun.
Mm-hmm.
They use the Hung Gar for the big, leg movements and big, positioning and all that, beautiful kung fu-y look. And then when they get in real close for the hand techniques going back and forth, that's embellished variations of Wing Chun.
Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I think you're right. Yeah. And then even like they do like I'm thinking about an exchange where they're like doing hands and then they do like the feet, like at the same
That's
time,
turns into that turns into Chi Ger. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Jimmy, do you think that it's because Wing Chun incorporates similar hands that all the other systems incorporate, or do you think that it's just the way that it looks the best on camera?
I personally believe, like, and I don't want to throw it out there like a Bruce Lee fanboy, because I am a fan of Bruce Lee. He's one of the main reasons why I went looking for Wing Chun. But I believe that Wing Chun is one of those systems that is fantastic at the nucleus of a person's combat, state. Like if you take Wing Chun, put it in the center, and then add, boxing, kickboxing, MMA, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you take all that stuff and you have like that Wing Chun right in the center as the nucleus to this thing. It will become something greater. I mean, look at Jeet Kune Do, and when I say that, please look at Jeet Kune Do practitioners who actually incorporate the philosophy that Bruce put together of making it your own, throwing away what's useless, using what's useful. Don't look at these Bruce Lee clones out there that their claim to fame is literally mimicking every move Bruce has ever done in a movie.
Yeah, so there'd be a difference there.
Which there are plenty of those guys out there, trust me. And then also, I'm a believer that, when it comes down to that, you got to understand that combat is chaos. I've said it before, combat is chaos, and we're the keepers of chaos. We've got to put it in its place or get out of its way. So if you don't know how to handle it, then I don't know what you're doing there, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I like what you said about that Wing Chun can enhance like other styles and other techniques. That ties into like some opinions of some people I've heard that are talking about that Wing Chun is can be more of a conceptual art rather than a complete art, quote unquote.
There's no such thing as a complete art, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone who says otherwise is full of crap, in my opinion. And I'll give my opinion straight to them. Every single system ever created has holes in it. If the person who is practicing that system tells you otherwise, they're trying to sell you some snake oil. Because Wing Chun is a very close quarter combat system. People believe Wing Chun doesn't have high kicks. That's wrong. Wing Chun originally was designed with high kicks in mind. Over time, people just brought them down. They didn't want to go above the hip, which is fine because let's be honest, in a 10-second scenario, which is what I teach my fighters for defending themselves on the street, in a 10-second scenario, you don't need to go that high with a kick. Take out their knee, take out, kick their shin out from under them, kick them in the hip, because now you're destroying their equilibrium on their center line, and then the head and body has to go down with it.
Right. Yeah.
So there is no such thing in my eyes as a complete martial arts system. If you fool yourself into thinking that going into it, unfortunately, there's going to be that one person who's never trained a day in their life who's going to do something erratic that's going to put you on your butt.
Yeah. That chaos.
Yeah.
So then, you mentioned that it's a close quarters. Like, what would you say are some of the other shortcomings of Wing Chun?
There aren't too many shortcomings in as far as the system's combat. As far, like I said, as far as defensive purposes, I believe the shortcomings come from training methods. The training methods are what really, if not utilized properly, the training methods could fool someone into thinking that they're invincible.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, for instance, I actually just did a YouTube video on this one and kind of briefly touched on it, which is Bong Sao, broken wing block.
Yeah.
And it's a very overly trained technique in Wing Chun because we do Bong Lap drills all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But it is, when it counts, a completely underutilized technique because the instructors 90% of the time will sit there and go, okay, train Bong Lap, and you spend thousands of hours training Bong Lap Da. And then when it comes down to apply stuff, they never show you a technique that incorporates that specific drill.
Okay.
So like, somebody could throw a punch at you and maybe you will react with Bong and block it. But what happened to Lap Da, that drill you've just spent thousands of hours drilling over and over and over? Well, the reality of it is that if you have somebody snap a jab out at you, which is what's going to happen, no matter the system, somebody's going to throw us a jab or a cross. Normally, the cross is going to be a plowing cross that's going to try to take your head off, or an overhand right, or a hook, or whatever. But that, depending if they're left or right-handed, the first hand usually they're going to throw out as a feeler is going to be the jab, whether it's a proper jab or not. And most people, they'll either do Pak Sao, which is one of the easiest blocks in Wing Chun, and people tend to overly rely on it, or they'll just get out of the way. So nobody ever attacks directly using Bong Lap Da, because if you try to grab the hand of a jab that just got blocked by Bong Sao, you're not going to do it. You're not fast enough to put that other hand that's in the back, reach over and grab it.
Right. It's not going to be there anymore.
Exactly. You're literally grasping at shadows. So you have to modify the methodology of it. Like, I teach to be able to do that, where instead of just standing there, if somebody throws a jab out, you shift a little and step forward on an angle, divert it with the bong, and already have your hand shooting. So when they snap it back, your hand falls into my hand, because it's already behind it on the retreat. And then I do what I need to do, so you have to modify it for what your intent is. There's a difference between combat method and training method. And everyone needs to understand that. Combat method is what you do in a fight. Training method is what you do to prepare your body to be able to take the grueling punishment of the fight. If I'm hitting a speed bag, that's not a combat method. That's a training method. If I'm jumping rope, that's a training method, not a combat method. If I'm running, 5-6 miles a day to get my cardio up, that's not combat method. That's training method. You know,
Right.
and that's the difference. And that's another reason why, if you go toe to toe with somebody who's training, I'm gonna go back to MMA, training MMA all day, every day, 5, 6, 7 days a week, and you get into a bar fight with this guy, guess who's gonna beat your ass?
They've been doing the combat method.
Exactly.
I think the fair thing to say though is a lot of these MMA guys are also trained well. Like the fitness level, like you were just saying, the training method. They do a lot of physical conditioning that you don't see as often in traditional martial arts
Exactly.
schools.
And that's one of
And obviously, you incorporate that. We noticed that, which is
yeah, I
great.
definitely try to incorporate as much of the grueling fitness portion as I can. You need it. Once a week, I do what I call my burnout session with my adults. My adults do an hour and a half. My classes are an hour and a half for my adults. I do an hour and a half one time a week of pure burnout. I put up a full-on calisthenic training area with hurdles,
Oh,
medicine
wow.
balls, weights, battle ropes, everything, every possible training method I can utilize. And we go for an hour and a half. My ring timer goes off. Every 3 minutes we switch what we're doing, and it just keeps going for muscle confusion and keeps your cardio just blasting. By the time everybody's done, everybody's drenched in sweat, no AC going. That's
Oh,
another thing.
no.
Yeah, oh no, I turn the AC off.
Wow.
That's one
And
thing.
for Florida, that gets
Yeah,
pretty hot
no.
and humid.
Oh yeah, I mean, I turn the AC off, and I have them burn out, and then
Is your school the Twisting Tiger or Shaolin Temple?
I, you're not the first one to ask me that, to be honest with you.
Uh,
um, but yeah, I burn them out. I mean, if I don't do it to them, and I don't pressure them, and I don't put that expectation on them when it counts, they're not going to have it.
mhm.
I've got a young lady with me who's been with me now about I want to say 2.5 years. Her name's Katie. When she first came to me, man, she was so soft spoken and very, very very, 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 very conscious of even putting her hands on anyone. Like, she was so scared to do it, and I knew the day that she broke that shell, broke through that shell, should I say, when she came in and asked me if she could run the warm up.
Oh.
One day, it took about a year. One day she came in and she was at my orange sash level, and which is where we start teaching Chump Q.
Uh-huh.
And she came in and was like, Sifu, I'd like to lead the warm up if I can. And I was like, are you sure? She was like, yeah, I think I'm ready. And then she took over the warm up and she hammered it out exactly how I do it. And she pushed everyone the way that I would expect an instructor to push, and she's been doing it ever since. And since then, I mean, she when I call her my little warrior princess, because she pushes harder than most of the guys, and I've got one of my assistant instructors, Isaac. He's actually going for his red sash, which is right below black.
Mhm.
And he's been doing it day in, day out with me for about 6 years. And when I tell you, he's laughing his butt off, because he's like, man, the left side of my face can't take any more slaps. and I asked him, this was literally the other day he said this, and I was like, what do you mean? He was like, man, Katie just in Chisao, man, she just keeps slapping the crap out of me. I can't stop her, and, and I'm like, well, considering when she first walked in, she would barely want to even touch hands, let alone slap somebody. I think that's a win, because that means that, God forbid, the day somebody ever tries to put their hands on her, she's not going to be afraid to snap back, you know?
Yeah. So through the training, she learned to be more like assertive and
Yes, she gained more confidence than a little bit. I mean, you could see it in her demeanor. She walks with her head held high now versus, she used to walk around with that very sheepish demeanor with, her shoulders hunched and her head down and stuff like that. Now her shoulders are back, her head held high, and that's everywhere. That's like going to the store. I knew it got real when she came in and her hair was cut and the right side of her hair was shaved. And I'm like, oh, yep, the real version of her is coming out.
cool.
So yeah, it gives, in my humble opinion, martial arts should let out the person you truly are, without letting out the jerk that's been hiding in everyone.
That's really great, actually. I really think that's true because, I don't know, that's been my experience with martial arts too, in the sense that when you do it, you understand your body more. You understand like your abilities, your boundaries. Like it's those things that it's not just like calisthenics training or like learning techniques and elbows and stuff. It's more it's this other like holistic thing. It's this other thing that you get out of it.
Yeah, it has a hell of a holistic feature to it. I mean, the name Sifu, people always say that it means master. Well,
Mm-hmm.
it does, but it doesn't. Like most foreign dialects, there's always multiple meanings to certain words.
Sure.
And in the Cantonese and Mandarin and Shanghainese, whichever dialect you're looking at, the term for Sifu or Shifu, it means father, teacher, or master.
Mm-hmm.
So I tend to try to be more of the teacher slash father type.
Mm-hmm.
I have never considered myself a master, even though, I've been called that a million times. I've gotten awards with stuff like that written on it. And I mean, it even surprised me recently. I was at a Hall of Fame event and I ended up getting an award and they put on it Grandmaster Sifu Jimmy Manfredy. And I'm like, okay. Thank you, because I don't ever consider myself a master of anything, because once I believe I mastered something, a bell rings and I'm like, oh, I can use that for this now. Let me train that,
Mm-hmm.
So I'm always trying to innovate even the simplest of things and figure out new ways to use them. So I've never liked that whole mentality of calling myself master or grandmaster or anything. I mean, if people call me that out of respect, that's perfectly fine. But
Yeah.
I personally, I would just rather be teacher or father. I treat all my students like they're my kids, no matter how old they are. I got a 72-year-old student, and he honored me one time by telling me, he was like, you know what, I wish I knew you when I was a younger man, because I could have used this advice when I was a younger man. So I'm like, oh wow, that says a lot.
That's a nice compliment. That is a really nice compliment to have someone that age that lived through
Yeah.
life.
I've been fortunate enough to be able to share with people that are younger than me and older than me, and I've been doing this for a long time, man. I'm 40 years old. I've been doing it longer than I can remember, to be honest with you, because I can't remember much since below 5.
Mm-hmm. 5 years old, punching the wall.
Yeah,
That's funny.
and it's funny because that stuff that I was afraid to do with my dad, I do it now for fun. So it's
Yeah.
weird.
So, well, let's wrap up here. It's we've covered a lot of stuff. We talked about a little bit about your history and then your principles with your students and your teaching. We talked about the MMA and everything like that. That's great. We've had a lot of stuff here today.
Well, I mean, we're talking about a subject I adore, so I mean, there's a ton I could say.
Yeah, I know. I feel like we could go on too. So, yeah, but Jimmy, thank you so much for talking with us.
It was a great conversation. We're happy to have you on again sometime. And if you want to give us a little more information on how to find you, what your website address is, more specifically, maybe where your school is.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Well, my federation can be found at wingchunfightingarts.com, as well as our address for my school, which is Twisting Tiger Academy. It's twistingtiger.com. We're here in Lakeland, Florida, 98 North. Pretty easy to find once you get in here. I am available at all times. You can go to my YouTube as well, Sifu Manfredy, where we teach street kung fu. Instagram at Sifu Manfredy, Twitter at Sifu Manfredy, and Facebook. You can find me at Jimmy Manfredy or Twisting Tiger.
Great. Okay. Yeah. And thanks again for coming and speaking with us.
Oh, my pleasure, guys.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Wing Chun Discussion Podcast. Log on to wingchundiscussion.com. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. More episodes are available on iTunes, Google Podcasts, and Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.